We've been looking at various scenarios in the scriptures where people felt like they were dying, that things were not going well, fairly, and God seemed to be nowhere to be found. He was the unlocatable God. When God is silent, he is not still. When he's doing nothing, he's up to something. No place is this principle driven to our souls any more than the book of Job. The book of Job is the quintessential expression of suffering in the Bible. Nothing compares to it in terms of understanding the nature and the struggle of suffering and not being able to locate God in your pain. Job, I've never taught on the book of Job. I've talked a lot about Job, but a cursory reading of the book of Job, you will discover, you talk about knowing God, and I'm going to bring a principle out in a moment. There's no place where you can better understand God in terms of a suffering than the book of Job, because that is its context. We're introduced to Job as a righteous man. So Job is committed to God. We're not talking about a pagan. We're not talking about a man who doesn't care anything about God. We're talking about a man who was deeply committed to God. That's in the first chapter. We're also talking about a successful man. The first chapter wants us to know how successful this man was in his business life. It tells you in verse 3 of chapter 1 all that he possessed. Therefore, it is possible to be godly and successful. And I'm using success there to refer to have achieved or accomplished a lot in life. He had accomplished a enterprise, if you will. He was also a family man with 10 children. And so he was committed to God. He had overwhelming wealth. And he had a family. This is Job. The problem occurs when something happens in heaven that Job is unaware of on earth. There is a meeting in heaven between God and the devil that Job doesn't know anything about, but the meeting is about Job. So Job is getting ready to suffer in history because of a discussion in eternity. Something's going on up there that he doesn't know a thing about, and in fact will never know anything about it. When the book ends, he still doesn't know that this meeting took place between God and the devil, which was going to affect his situation on earth. The Lord, verse 7, says to Satan, "From where do you come?" Then Satan answers to the Lord and says, "From roaming about on the earth and walking around on it." So the devil tells God, "I've been hanging out on earth." The Lord said to Satan, "Well, in your travels, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man, fearing God and turning away from evil." Then Satan says, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" What Satan says about Job is the only reason you're getting all of this love from Job is because of how much you blessed him. In other words, he's in it for the blessing. He's in it for the blessing. He's going to praise you because the money is coming in. He's going to praise you because his health is sound. He's going to praise you because his family's intact. He's going to praise you because everything is going so perfect in this man's life. Who wouldn't follow God? I believe he's following you, but not for nothing. He's following you for something. So an accusation is made. Satan is called in the Bible the accuser of the brethren. So he brings Job up. Now, this introduces a whole theology that our time will not allow us to get into. We've talked about it in detail some years ago on the angelic conflict or the battle between angels. Satan is an angel. Of course, he's the chief angel of the demons. His regiment are the demons. And the job of angels is to interact with earth from the spiritual realm. This room, we just had a discussion on our leadership meeting, is right now full of angels. There are angels encircling this room. Why? Because Hebrews 1:14 says believers have been assigned angels. So everybody in here has at least one angel who is responsible for you as a believer. He is responsible for you. There will be many things you will discover in eternity that could have happened, that didn't happen, not because of you, but because of an angel. You thought it was luck or chance, or you woke up when you nodded off just in time and you didn't have the accident, when actually you were nudged, but you were touched by an angel. Angels are all over the place. The problem is that they're invisible beings. But being invisible doesn't mean they're not real. God is invisible, doesn't mean he's not real. It's another realm. It's a spiritual realm. Satan is an angel. He was called the archangel. The Bible says Satan is like a roaring lion seeking who he may devour, or let me use another word, whom he might dominate, who he might take control of, who he might run. God says Job is committed to me, and he's not committed to me just because I bless him. He's committed to me because he's committed to me. Satan challenges that and says, well, let me touch him. Let me take all the goodies away, and let's see how much he is committed to you. He says in verse 10, have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hand and his possessions and have increased in land. But put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face. Because it's not about you. It's about the stuff. It's about the goodies. Then the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not put forth your hand on him. So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord. Satan only got to touch Job by permission. So there's one thing you need to know about the devil, and that even as the devil, he's God's devil. In other words, when it comes to God's children, particularly, because that's what we're talking about now, Satan has to get permission to touch you. Particularly if you're upright in your pursuit of God, and your pursuit of God is authentic. He's challenging it. Now, there are all kinds of theological questions. Well, why didn't God just stop Satan? Why didn't he stop him with Adam and Eve in the garden? Okay? God will, for his own sovereign purposes, choose to demonstrate to the spiritual realm the commitment of those who are authentically his and who are committed to him. And, who God chooses, how God chooses, why God chooses, that's a mystery that I can't answer for specific situations. But Job is an illustration of that. So Satan is allowed to test Job, and Job is about to enter in, beginning in verse 13, the worst day of his life. His world will come crumbling down in a day. He is getting ready to go through something that is beyond human ability to grasp in terms of devastation, because he loses everything. Yeah, that just summarizes it. He loses his children, he loses his servants, he loses his business, he loses his wealth, he loses his health, he loses everything on a dime. And he loses everything on a dime because Satan was allowed to touch him, given permission to do so by God. And I know that's hard to grasp, and it's hard to accept, yet we can't rewrite the Bible to only the parts we like. We can't just skip the book of Job and pretend like it's not in the Bible. Then, verse 20, Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head. That's a position of despair. He fell to the ground and worshiped. Now, if there's any day that you don't feel like going to church, that you don't feel like exalting and extolling God, is today. The question on the floor is, will you worship God when things are not going well for you? It's easy to worship God when it's all flowing. When the money's right, when the relationships are right, when the circumstances are right, when there is no pain, no problem. But Job says, God told Satan about Job, Job is not relating to me simply because of what I give him. Now, we would probably all say that. We would probably all say, well, I love the Lord because I just love the Lord. And while I'm grateful for what he's given me, that's not why I love him. Well, how are we going to really know that? In other words, what's the proof of that? The proof of that is what you do when you don't have all of that. When it's a bad day, a disappointing day, when you didn't get the raise and you didn't get the promotion and you didn't get the opportunity and it didn't work out. You were praying and trusting God and all that, and it went opposite to what you were asking for. Do you still worship him? Do you still love him? And do you still exalt him? You see, the proof of your love is when it goes bad, not only when it's going good. So he worships, and he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Through all of this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. Now, that's an interesting statement because it says he didn't blame God. But in the previous verse, he says the Lord gives and the Lord takes. Sound like he blaming God to me. He says the Lord took all this. What he means by not blaming God is he did not do what Satan said he would do. And that is blame God in the sense of turning his back on God. But he recognized something that if you, me, us, we ever grab it, it will be the most transforming concept you will ever grab, although it is often a difficult concept to accept. And that is the sovereignty of God. The sovereignty of God simply says that nothing comes to you that doesn't come through his hand. And sometimes that's giving and sometimes that's taking. It's not always giving. Now we want that. Everybody wants their blessing. Everybody wants God to give, and God does give, and he gives plenty. He gave plenty to Job. But the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, which meant Job recognized between giving and taking that all he had was a gift from God, and that because it was a gift from God, God had final rights to decide where things wound up. The only way to survive life, particularly when it's doing you in, is to remember the sovereignty of God. So Job didn't know about the devil, but Job knew enough to know that none of this would have happened if God hadn't allowed it. Now he knew that much, that this would not have happened had God not allowed it. Whatever you are going through, or when you go through those days, and you will go through those days will happen. You don't go looking for them. They know where you live. You will go through those days, and you will raise the question of the book of Job. And the question of the book of Job is simply this: why do the righteous suffer? Because we already told he's upright. I'm amazed at what some preachers try to do with this book. They try to say that, well, Job went into a bad spell. And he went into a bad spell, and because he went into a bad spell, this happened to him. But the book goes out in front to tell you how upright he was. I mean, it tells you that on the front end. What people want is they want to dodge this reality that God does allow negative things in our lives. This is not heaven. That's yet to come. He does allow it. I want to challenge you and us, when that happens, I want us to go against our nature and worship. Anyway, his wife, chapter 2, verse 9, said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. The helpmate becomes a hurtmate. Curse God and die. I kind of feel for her because she's seeing him suffer. She don't want to see him suffer anymore. But remember, that's what Satan wanted to get him to do, to curse God. She's saying, why don't you go ahead and curse God so he can end this? What does Job say? He said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God and not accept adversity? In all of this, Job did not sin with his lips. So we're being told Job is not sinning. He says everybody only wants good. And sure, we want good. We should want good. But he says if God allows negative, bad, adversity in our lives, it's still God allowing it. So he's still appealing to the sovereignty of God. Many times we have to deal with situations we don't understand in people's lives. The death of a baby. A woman has her first pregnancy. She's lived with 9 months of joy and anticipation, and the baby dies. Can we give an explanation for why that happened? Absolutely not. And you can make up all the fanciful statements you want to make, and it doesn't change the fact this is this woman's baby. And so we face those. We face tragedies and difficulties in ministering to people. If those things didn't happen, you wouldn't even need ministry. Ministry exists because in this world there is trouble. And no trouble hits a believer that does not pass through God's fingers first. So here's what you must do. You must say, God, this came through you. Even though it wasn't directly done by God. He gave Satan permission to do it. So certain things God won't do that he will allow to be done. That's sovereignty. Now, when you get to heaven and you ask him about it, you're going to go, oh, okay. It'll make sense. We can't make sense of a lot of this now. We can't answer all the why questions. Sometimes we get an answer and sometimes we don't. But Job is holding on to his belief system that God is in control. See, God is not in control only of the blessings. He's in control of the mess. Now, when you are going through, whatever you're going through, whenever you're going through it, God will most naturally seem far away. Look at chapter 23. Job chapter 23. Verse 8, behold, I go forward, but he is not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he acts on the left, I cannot behold him. He turns on the right, I cannot see him. So I can't find God. That's what he says in verses 8 and 9. But then look at what he says in verse 10. But he knows the way I take. I can't find him, but he knows where I'm located. When he has tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot has held fast to his path. I have kept his way and not turned aside. I have not departed from the command of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. I can't find him, but he knows me. He knows where I am, why I am, how long I've been here, how long I'm going to be here. I'm going to worship him because of what I know he knows. Even though I don't understand why he's doing this to me and why it's taking so long for it to change. So he can't find God, and God is often absent as far as what we can perceive. We feel God when things are going well. But when he's nowhere to be found because we're going through and it looks like Satan is having his way with us or circumstances are having his way with us. Now, this all comes to a head because he's trying to figure this out. He's trying to figure out, why are you doing this to me? And he's not getting any answers. This all culminates now beginning in chapter 38. Now, we don't have time to read this, but I want you to read chapters 38 through 41. In those chapters, 38 through 41, God now enters the scene, the God he couldn't find. And verse 1 says, then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind. So Job has been asking for 37 chapters, where are you? I can't find you. How come? How long? It ain't right. He's got 37 chapters. He's been trying to figure this out. He called some of his homeboys, 3 of his homeboys around. So why can y'all help me figure this out? And they messed him up more. Yeah, he's trying to figure this out. Because sometimes only God can deal with it. It's too deep. It's too personal to you. And while you're seeking answers, you're not getting specific clarification for why you stuck in this mess. In verse 38, God gives him a lecture on God. It is one of the most pregnant lectures on God in the Bible that shows the scope of God's greatness, the scope of God's sovereignty, the scope of God's control, and the finiteness and limitations of a man. Basically, he tells Job in 38 to 41, all you giving yourself is an Excedrin PM headache, because I am the unfigure-outable God. That's what he's going to tell him in 38 to 41. This one you need the whole bottle for, because this one, he tells him, he says, why don't you help me keep the water from coming up on the sand? Why don't you go out and feed Leviathan? That's the dinosaur. Why don't you go out there, why don't you feed the lions? Why don't you go out and do that? In other words, he's showing him his limitations. He's saying to him, you're not going to figure this out, Job. You're not going to figure this out. Now, chapter 42, in closing. Watch this now. Job, he gets his lecture from God through chapter 41. Then Job answered the Lord after he gets his lecture and says, I know that you can do all things. I got it. So you could have stopped this a long time ago. You could have changed this. You could have reversed this because you bad. I got it. And that no purpose of yours will be thwarted. So he learning some theology here. I know you got this in control even though it feels out of control. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? What in the world have I gotten myself into with you? Therefore, I have declared that which I did not understand. I'm talking stuff I don't know nothing about. I don't know nothing about. Because when you start talking about God too long, you just illustrating ignorance. He said, I've been talking about stuff and don't even know what I'm talking about. He says, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. I didn't know all of this until I went through this trouble. Okay, you find that? I didn't know all this about you till I went through this mess. It's going to get good here. He says, hear now, and I will speak. I will ask you, and you instruct me, because I've been telling you what to do. Okay, so I'm going to take a listening pose now. I have heard of you, oh, I love this verse, by the hearing of the ear. I went to Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. I heard all those sermons by Evans. I listened to tapes. I read books. I heard about you with the hearing of the ear. But now my eyes see you. Therefore I will retract and I will repent in dust and ashes. He said, I thought I knew a little something about God until I got in this situation I couldn't fix. I'm in this situation I couldn't fix. You're nowhere to be found. And I think I know enough about God to explain my way out of this, and I couldn't. Then you show up and bust me. Chapter 38 through 41. You show up and put me in my little old place, and I discover I don't know nothing about you. You are beyond my comprehension. But what I know now is I have seen you with my eyes rather than just heard about you with my ears. Now, all this is driving to what I want to share with you right now. The main thing, the main reason why God allows us, even in our righteousness, to go through painful and sometimes prolonged situations is to give us a fresh vision of him that goes beyond what we heard and can recite and quote, the hearing of the ear. He wants to give you some eye candy. He wants to give you some sight of him that you would have not gotten in a normal, blessed life. What you want to look for when you're going through, and yet you want to get out, you pray to get out, sure, you want deliverance, nothing wrong with that. He spends many chapters asking for deliverance. But while you're waiting for whatever's going to do, God's going to do, and whenever he's going to do it, I want to challenge you to become a worshiper and to ask God to let you see him again for the first time. To let you have a view of him unlike you have ever had before. When you say, Lord, be real to me, one method he may use, it's not the only method he does use, but one method he may use is to allow circumstances to go south, to give you a fresh view of him. Now, everybody wants to get to the rest of the chapter. Verse 10, the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends, and the Lord increased all that Job had twofold. So God gave back to Job everything that he lost. Now we like that. But watch the pattern. He's righteous. He loses everything. He doesn't understand why, but he gets this fresh view of God. He responds to the fresh view of God, then he gets back the stuff. What we want is, I lost the stuff, give me back the stuff. I ain't into no fresh view of nothing. I just want, I want what the enemy has stolen from me. I want it back. I want the stuff. Well, he got the stuff, but only when he got the vision. Because the purpose of the pain was to give him a new view of God, unlike he had before. We saw that with Paul. I'm going to give you a thorn in the flesh, because in this thorn, this little thing that's irritating you to death, you're going to experience me at a level that you did not experience me before you had the thorn. So he says in chapter 13, verse 15, quoted earlier, though he slay me, why is God killing me? Though he slay me, I'm going to trust him, that I'm going to see him in a way I have never, ever, 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 never, 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 ever seen him before. And when you respond to that, now we can talk about the stuff. Nothing wrong with getting the stuff. But what God is after is you getting him a fresh view of his glory.